everyone. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name's Aphra Shemza, and I am a light artist. And I'm going to talk to you about my practice and also about art in flux a little bit. And then I'll hand over to Oliver Gingrich, who will continue. Oops, that was not what I meant to do. And again. Am I at the end of my, yeah. That's the same slide at the end and the beginning. Okay, perfect. So I've been trying to think a little bit about who I am and what I do. So I've sort of divided that into four different parts, basically. So first and foremost, I'm an artist. I'm also a manager of the estate of Virgil Alshams, who's my grandfather, and I'm going to introduce him a little bit first, because I think it gives you quite a good contextual grounding for my work and my kind of cultural heritage. I'm an educator, so I teach on foundation and diploma art courses, and in the last 18 months I've been developing independent workshops where I teach art and technology and plastics recycling and things like that to other artists and creatives. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I'm also a co-founder of Art in Flux, and Art in Flux is a charitable organisation for artists who work with technology. So I'll talk to you a bit more in depth about all these different things as I go through. I will try and whip through everything as quickly as possible because I know we're a bit short on time. So, Virgil Alshams was my grandfather. Unfortunately, he died in 1985, and I was born in 1988, so I never got to meet him. But his work has surrounded me and my family home for my whole life, and he's been a huge inspiration to me. He was from Pakistan, and he came over to London in the 50s and studied at the Slade School of Fine Art. And there he started to develop his own unique style of artwork, where he fused Western modernism with Islamic geometry, exploring how the East and the West can kind of combine to create his own unique style. So my work with the estate sees me flying all over the world, disseminating information and knowledge about my grandfather's work, publishing articles. I published an article in Taste It, etc., after we had the cake bottom display. Because at the moment, or within the last 10 years, there's been a rethinking of cultural heritage of this country, so British art, and how migrant artists have come to this country in the 50s, 60s, and what their place is within British art history. And so this is why it's been such a resurgence in interest in his work, and sort of that's what I'm doing with the estate. So his practice has really informed a lot of the basics for my own visual language and exploration. So bold abstract designs and compositions. So I'll now move in to talk a little bit more about my work. So I'm a light artist predominantly. I'm a multimedia artist, and I would also call myself a new media artist. Now, I'm slightly different from some of the artists that have been speaking already today, in that I work with real materials. When I say real materials, I mean I work with wood, metal, plastic. I don't just work on screens or with computer code and things like that. So I have very much a sort of traditional sense of being a fine artist, and I would say I'm kind of a sculptor as well as a multimedia artist. So I work with light, abstraction and interactivity, and I combine these with traditional sculpting materials to create my work. I tend to work in series, and with each series I have a different aesthetic quality. So here you can see one of my infinity mirror pieces, which is one of the composition series. This piece was made, commissioned by Louis Roeder at Champagne, who made Cristal, and it was exhibited in the Shard in 2016. So there's a whole series of work that are all these infinity mirror patterns. Here I'm exploring the kind of intimate, the micro and the macro, the looking out to the universe, and also the sort of the confines of atoms, or how we relate to the universe and things around us. So not only am I creating work with light, but I also often create work with interactivity. So I'm using an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi. I don't know if a lot of you probably know what those things are. They're small microcontrollers or computers where you can program those, and I can take in inputs using sensors, so like a microphone or a distance sensor, and then I can output those readings to LEDs. So this piece at the bottom here is a sound reactive piece, and it takes in sound inputs and displays it across the waveforms on the LEDs here. And at the moment I've got a piano, a street piano in Canary Wharf that does the same thing basically. So when someone's playing the piano, all the LEDs on the sides of it light up and create a dazzling kind of effect. So the totems, they're my works just over the back there. A lot of my work is to do with this. Thank you, glamorous assistant there. So the totems, and a lot of my work is about this sort of dichotomy between us as human beings wanting to be natural, wanting to put our phones down, leave our technology behind and go off into nature. And how this is difficult for us when we're confronted with all these technologies that we need to use day to day. And the Totem series is kind of like an emblem of our times, looking at how organic and inorganic can kind of come together to create a sort of balance. So in the last year, I actually started getting quite concerned, or been making a lot of these objects, and a lot of them had technology involved in them, and I was selling them. And so my client said, but what if the work breaks? What happens then? Are you going to give me a maintenance contract? How do we figure this out? How do I look after these artworks? And I started thinking, well, yeah, because I'm producing these things that could end up as waste, technology waste, basically. And obviously you don't want that to happen with your artworks, and we don't want to be adding lots and lots of waste into the world. So these were some of the ideas. I was thinking about legacy, I was thinking about how to create sustainable art practice, how, as somebody working with technology, I would be able to do that. So last year I was funded by the Arts Council for a project called Solutions for a Sustainable Art Practice. And this was a 3-month artist residency project. So I was artist in residence at Building Blocks, which is a maker space in North London, near IKEA. And I learnt, basically I was looking at my 2 core materials, which are wood and plastic, and trying to find sustainable alternatives for those materials. So this is my desk during the time I was there. So I was working with all different things. I had some funding, so I was able to employ a photographer to work with me every week and document my journey, which was really key for this project, because it not only was about me on my journey, it was about sort of educating and showing other people how they could also be more sustainable with their practice. All of that was published on my social media channels, and I also released a website, which I'll talk a little bit more about. So the wood workshop, I basically was looking at how to work with reclaimed timber rather than working with things like MDF sheet material, that sort of stuff. So I didn't know previously how to work with hardwood, so I learned new skills for taking rough sawn timber and cutting, planing, chopping and all those different types of things, and learning how to work with timber, real wood. And not only was I learning how to work with the wood and how to shape it, but I was also figuring out how to embed technology into these things, because I am a light artist, so I didn't want to lose that. So I started learning how to kind of route out different sections so I could embed technology. Here you can see some soldering, that kind of stuff. And there's a few works that kind of came out of that. This one's called Current Climate. The piece is connected to the internet. Each of the logs relates to a different country in the world, and whenever climate change or kind of something related to climate issues, so for example the Australian bushfires would be lighting these things up, they would be glitching out basically in real time. At the moment this is, I would say, almost like a maquette for a larger public sculpture I'd like to realise moving on. But the headlines are all printing to a website, and I think it's an interesting concept that I would like to take further in the future. So my plastic workshop, I was learning how to recycle 2 different types of plastic, low density polyethylene and high density polyethylene. So low density polyethylene is bubble wrap and plastic bags. So these are some tiles that I created with that technique. So I was melting these things in the oven and then popping them into a hydraulic press once they were melted and pressing out flat tiles. And you got these beautifully kind of inky patterns. The interesting thing about low density polyethylene is that it can't be recycled already, and so you're really turning a completely waste material into a new material and imbuing it with value. I don't know what I did. So that was some of the finished works for those. And high density polyethylene, so bubble wrap and plastic bags. Sorry, no, that was low density polyethylene. High density polyethylene, milk bottles, food containers, all that kind of stuff. So this technique for recycling was taught to me by Machines Room in East London, and with that I was putting these things into a NutriBullet, grinding it all up, and then popping the material in between two metal plates in a toasty maker and creating sheet material that way. So here's some more tiles that I created. So here we've got mushroom containers, the brown ones mixed in with milk bottles to create these new surfaces. So if you're interested in finding out about that, I've got a plastics workshop coming up where 6 lucky people will be able to come and learn how to recycle plastic and turn it into materials to use in your work, jewellery, coasters, etc. So get in touch about that. And I also published a lot of my findings and my research on a website called artology.co.uk. So this is a website where I have put all of my research, lots of case studies, links to sustainable suppliers, and I hope that this will be a kind of a place where artists can go to start to begin the questions about being more mindful about our practice. I definitely haven't, this is definitely not finished for me, this project, and I haven't even dipped my toe really into the technology side of it. I've looked a lot into using technology that can be, that will last a long time, that has guarantees, that can be swapped out easily. So if you're using a light source, try and use something that could be swapped for another one later down the line. Don't make it so custom that nobody will be able to kind of keep upgrading it if it needs to be. But aside from that, I need to delve way more into renewable energy, etc. So this is my life's work kind of coming along now. So the future. I've basically decided I love this Solutions for a Sustainable Art Practice as a project, and there were lots of little artworks that came out of that. I want to keep working like that as I kind of progress. So I've got 2 strands now that I'm going to be looking into. One is my sustainable practice, and I want to be looking at a lot to do with our waste as human beings and how we can sort of tackle